Alright, chapters 15 and 16 of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn are a whole emotional roller coaster. One moment you're vibing with Huck and Jim on their chill river journey, and the next, you're hit with some serious tension. It's like watching a buddy movie that suddenly remembers it's supposed to have drama. Let's dive in. So, Huck and Jim are still living their best raft life, cruising down the Mississippi, but things start to get messy when they hit some thick fog. And by messy, I mean total lost in the sauce energy. Huck's all, let's keep going, while Jim's like, nah, we should chill and wait this out. Spoiler, they don't chill. Instead, they get separated. Huck's in the canoe, Jim's on the raft, and the fog's so dense they can't see or hear each other. It's like trying to find your squad in Fortnite when you drop in different zones, absolute chaos. Huck is yelling, Jim's yelling, but it's like the fog swallowed them whole. Huck's out here paddling like he's in the final lap of Mario Kart, trying to find the raft, and things are getting tense. He starts hearing these creepy noises in the fog, and you can almost feel his panic through the page. It's giving serious Silent Hill vibes. Just when it feels like they're never going to find each other, Huck finally hears Jim's voice in the distance. Cue the dramatic reunion. But wait, Huck decides this is the perfect time to pull one of his classic pranks. When he gets back to the raft, instead of being like, hey, Jim, I found you, he acts all casual and says he never left. He's straight up gaslighting Jim, trying to convince him that the whole fog thing was just a bad dream. Jim, bless his heart, actually starts to believe him for a second, but then he notices all the damage on the raft and realizes Huck's lying. And let me tell you, Jim is not happy. This is one of those moments where Huck starts to grow up a bit. Jim calls him out, saying he was scared out of his mind, thinking he'd lost Huck for good. He says Huck's all he's got, and Huck feels real bad for messing with him. It's like that moment in every teen drama where the jokester realizes their pranks actually hurt someone. Huck apologizes, and for Huck, that's a big deal. You can see him starting to understand that Jim isn't just some tag-along, he's family now. Now, on to chapter 16, where things get even more intense. Huck and Jim are getting closer to Cairo, where Jim hopes to find freedom. You can feel the anticipation building, like the final boss battle is just around the corner. Jim's hyped, talking about how he's going to work hard, save up money, and buy his family out of slavery. Huck, on the other hand, is spiraling. He starts thinking about how society would see him as a terrible person for helping Jim escape. He's all, what if people think I'm a criminal? What if they say I'm betraying my kind? Huck's conscience is glitching hard, stuck between what he's been taught and what he feels is right. And then, because this is Huck Finn we're talking about, things go sideways again. They see a couple of dudes in a skiff rowing toward them. These guys are out here hunting runaway slaves, and Huck's heart is doing triple backflips. The dudes pull up and ask Huck if there's anyone else on the raft. Huck's got about 2 seconds to decide what to do. He could snitch on Jim, or he could lie his face off. Huck, being the smooth operator he is, goes full improv mode. He tells the men there's someone sick on the raft, real sick, like contagious plague levels of sick. He's like, yeah, you don't want to come too close. My family's got smallpox. The hunters freak out and nope right out of there. Huck's lie saves Jim, but afterward, Huck's back in his feelings, debating whether he's a hero or a villain. He's got this whole dramatic inner monologue where he decides he's going to hell for helping Jim but figures, well, if I'm going to hell, might as well go all in. Classic Huck logic. As they keep moving, they realize they missed Cairo, and that's a huge bummer. Jim's devastated, and Huck's feeling all kinds of guilty again. But despite the setback, they don't give up. They're still in this together, and their bond is stronger than ever. So, yeah, these chapters are a whole mix of heartwarming, nerve-wracking, and downright hilarious moments. You've got Huck leveling up emotionally, Jim showing how much he cares about their friendship, and some peak Huck shenanigans with that smallpox lie. It's messy, it's real, and it's got all the chaotic energy of two unlikely heroes just trying to make it in a world stacked against them. Stay tuned, because this river journey isn't slowing down anytime soon. Alright, chapters 17 and 18 of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn are like stepping into a 19th century soap opera, but with more guns, drama, and feuding families. Imagine if Romeo and Juliet collided with the Hunger Games, but Huck's there, narrating the chaos with his usual roll-with-it energy. So, here's the sitch, Huck gets separated from Jim again, because, of course, he does, and ends up stumbling onto the property of this big OL house in the middle of nowhere. And this isn't just any house, it's a full-on southern mansion, giving off some major Bridgerton vibes. Huck, being Huck, lies his way into the good graces of the family living there, calling himself George Jackson. Yeah, he just whips up a fake name like it's nothing, classic Huck move. The family is the Grangerfords, and they're rich. Like, we own a plantation and have way too much furniture rich. They're also kinda weird. The first thing Huck notices is that everything in the house is super fancy but also low-key spooky. There are all these poems and sketches by a dead family member, Emmeline, who is apparently super into drawing depressing stuff. Think Wednesday Addams meets Victorian goth vibes. Huck's like, well, this is creepy, but the food's good, so I'm not complaining. The Grangerfords are super nice to Huck, almost too nice. They're all polite and proper, but there's this unspoken tension hanging in the air. Huck eventually learns why. They're locked in this long-running feud with another family, the Shepherdsons. Like, these two families hate each other so much that even Game of Thrones would be like, y'all need to chill. But instead of fighting over a throne, they're just out here shooting at each other for reasons no one even remembers. Huck's like, this is the pettiest thing I've ever seen, but okay. One day, Huck tags along with one of the Grangerford boys, Buck, who's around Huck's age but way more into violence. Buck explains the whole feud situation like it's a normal Tuesday. Huck's just trying to vibe, but then they run into a Shepherdson, and Buck tries to shoot him. Huck's like, whoa, okay, I didn't sign up for a live-action battle royale. The Shepherdson escapes, but the tension between the families cranks up to an 11. Now, here's where the soap opera vibes really kick in. It turns out one of the Grangerford daughters, Sophia, has been sneaking around with a Shepherdson boy. Yup, forbidden romance alert. It's giving serious Romeo and Juliet energy, but with less poetry and way more muskets. Sophia gets Huck to secretly retrieve a note from the Shepherdson guy, and Huck doesn't think much of it at first. He's like, just helping her with her homework or something. Spoiler, it's definitely not homework. The next day, all hell breaks loose. Sophia and the Shepherdson dude run off together, and the Grangerfords and Shepherdsons go full Call of Duty mode. It's an all-out shootout, and Huck is smack in the middle of it. He's dodging bullets, hiding behind trees, and just trying not to die. Meanwhile, Buck, who's way too into this feud, gets caught up in the action, and things take a dark turn. Huck sees Buck and another Grangerford get killed, and it's a brutal wake-up call. He's like, man, this feud stuff is straight up dumb and deadly. Huck bails on the Grangerfords' drama and makes his way back to the river, where he finally reunites with Jim. And let me tell you, that reunion hits different. Huck's like, bro, you won't believe what I just went through, and Jim's just happy Huck's alive. It's the emotional reset Huck desperately needed after all the carnage. As they float down the river again, Huck can't stop thinking about how pointless and tragic the whole feud was. It's one of those rare moments where Huck gets deep, realizing that all the fancy manners and southern hospitality mean nothing when people are this consumed by hate. The river feels like freedom all over again, a safe space where Huck and Jim can escape the madness of the world. So, yeah, these chapters are wild. You've got Huck navigating creepy mansions, dodging bullets in a family feud, and even playing secret messenger for a forbidden love story. It's dramatic, it's tragic, and it's chaotic in that classic Huck Finn way. Through it all, Huck's learning that the civilized world isn't all it's cracked up to be. Honestly, the guy just wants to chill on his raft with Jim, and at this point, can you blame him? Stay tuned, because the river journey is far from over, and you already know Huck and Jim are about to run into even more madness. Alright, chapters 19 and 20 of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn are like when your quiet gaming session turns into an online co-op chaos because two randoms join your party and start spamming nonsense in chat. Huck and Jim are living the dream on their raft, peaceful, free, just two brothers floating down the river. But then, out of nowhere, two of the most extra NPCs crash the vibe, and things take a wild turn. So, here's the scene. Huck's been soaking up the chill river vibes, waxing poetic about nature like he's auditioning for National Geographic. He's all, man, the river at sunset? It's better than any TikTok filter. Then he and Jim hear this noise coming from the woods, and surprise, it's two random dudes sprinting toward them like they're in the final round of Squid Game. These guys are being chased by dogs, which is already sketchy, but Huck's too curious to just leave them. He's like, hop on the raft, guys. No questions asked. Now, these two clowns don't waste any time making themselves at home. First, we've got the younger dude, who looks like he spends way too much time thinking about his non-existent career as a big shot. He's all, call me a duke, because, spoiler, I'm royalty. Then there's the older guy, who's like, a duke? That's cute. I'm a king, bow down, peasants. Huck and Jim just stare at them like, did we accidentally pick up the villains from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? The duke and the king are clearly full of it, but Huck's learned by now that sometimes it's easier to just play along. He's like, sure, your majesties, whatever floats your boat. Jim's less amused but rolls with it too because he's got bigger things to worry about, like not getting caught. It's kind of hilarious watching these two con artists compete to see who can make up the most ridiculous backstory. The duke says he's the rightful heir to some European throne, while the king claims he's a long-lost French royal. It's the cringiest cosplay performance ever, but Huck's just sitting there like, yup, I'm totally buying this, even though you know he's not. Once the two fraudsters have officially declared themselves royalty of the raft, they start making plans to scam their way to Easy Street. And by plans, I mean schemes so ridiculous even a 5-year-old would be like, this is dumb. First, the king announces that he's going to pretend to be a preacher at a camp meeting they're passing by. He's like, I'll act all holy, and these suckers will throw money at me. Honestly, it's giving strong televangelist vibes. The king's performance is straight up Oscar-worthy in the worst way. He waltzes into the camp meeting, throws himself on the ground, and starts bawling about how he's a reformed pirate who's dedicating his life to God now. The crowd eats it up like it's the series finale of their favorite drama. People are crying, throwing money at him, and begging him to keep being holy. Meanwhile, Huck's watching all this go down like, this guy's a clown, but hey, free cash. While the king is busy milking the camp meeting crowd, the duke is cooking up his own scam. He decides to print fake posters for a production of Romeo and Juliet. Why? Because apparently scamming small-town theater nerds is the move. He even ropes Huck into playing Juliet, which is just as chaotic as it sounds. Imagine Huck in a dress, trying to act romantic while the duke's directing like he's Steven Spielberg. It's pure comedy gold. Back on the raft, things are less funny and more tense. Jim starts opening up about how much he misses his family, and it's one of those rare moments where you see just how deep his emotions run. Huck's listening, feeling all kinds of conflicted. He knows Jim's pain is real, but he's still battling that ingrained idea that helping Jim is wrong because of what society's drilled into him. It's like Huck's trying to update his moral firmware, but the download is slow. By the end of these chapters, Huck and Jim's peaceful little river getaway has turned into a traveling circus, thanks to their new freeloading royalty. The Duke and the King are messy, shady, and a total pain, but Huck's sticking with them for now because, well, what else can he do? You get the sense that Huck's learning to navigate more than just the river, he's figuring out how to deal with people's BS without losing himself. So, to sum it up, these chapters are chaotic, hilarious, and kind of deep when you least expect it. Huck and Jim pick up two scammers who turn the raft into a floating drama fest, complete with fake sermons and bootleg Shakespeare. Through it all, Huck's still growing, and Jim's still the real MVP, holding it together while the world goes nuts around him. What's next for this misfit crew? Knowing Huck's luck, probably more scams, more drama, and more life lessons in disguise. Stay tuned, because the river ride isn't slowing down anytime soon. Alright, buckle up, because chapters 21 and 22 of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn are like watching a chaotic lip stream where the chat is full of trolls and everything goes off the rails. Huck, Jim, the Duke, and the King have docked their sketchy traveling circus in a random Arkansas town, and let me tell you, this place is straight out of Red Dead Redemption, dusty streets, shady characters, and zero chill. So, the Duke and the King decide to upgrade their scamming game by planning a next-level theater scheme. The Duke starts hyping up this epic play he's going to put on. He's like, people will pay big bucks to see some highbrow Shakespeare. But here's the plot twist, the Duke's Shakespeare knowledge is about as legit as his title. This dude's out here mashing up random lines from Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, and who knows what else, like it's the original multiverse crossover. He's practicing sword fights and dramatic monologues on the raft, looking like a discount Renaissance fair reject. Huck watches all this go down and is probably thinking, man, I've seen better acting in Dragon Ball Z dubs. Once they hit town, the vibes are already sus. The people here are wild, like, we'll fight you just for looking at us wrong wild. Huck wanders around and notices the place is basically chaos central. A drunk guy named Boggs is causing a scene, yelling at some dude named Colonel Sherburne. Boggs is sloppy drunk, stumbling around and talking trash, and everyone's just laughing at him because apparently this is normal. But things take a dark turn when Sherburne shows up. Now, Sherburne isn't just some random guy, he's got main character energy. He's all calm and serious, like a villain in a Quentin Tarantino movie. Boggs keeps running his mouth, and Sherburne's like, you've got until 1 p.m. to shut up. And you think, okay, maybe he's bluffing. Spoiler, he's not. Boggs doesn't stop, and Sherburne just casually walks out and shoots him in broad daylight. Yeah, no hesitation. It's like the Wild West version of hitting someone with a final smash in Super Smash Bros. The crowd loses it, people are screaming, and Huck's standing there like, what did I just witness? Then, because mob mentality is undefeated, the townspeople decide they're not okay with Sherburne killing Boggs, even though they were just laughing at Boggs 5 minutes ago. They grab torches and pitchforks, mob style, and march over to Sherburne's house. It's giving serious Attack on Titan vibes, with Sherburne playing the cool, unbothered bad guy who's totally ready for a fight. But instead of panicking, Sherburne steps out onto his porch, looks down at the angry crowd, and basically says, y'all are clowns. Sherburne delivers this savage speech where he completely roasts the mob. He's like, you're all big and bad in a group, but none of you have the guts to stand up to me one-on-one. It's brutal, but also kind of iconic. The mob just stands there awkwardly, like when a teacher calls out the whole class and nobody knows what to say. Eventually, they all just slink away, and Sherburne goes back inside, like, that's what I thought. Huck watches the whole thing, and you can tell he's both freaked out and low-key impressed. I mean, Sherburne is awful, but he's got that scary confidence that makes people listen. Meanwhile, the Duke and the King's scam is about to go live. They've plastered posters all over town for their show, titled The Royal Nunsuch, which sounds fancy but is really just a hot mess waiting to happen. The posters are covered in big, flashy words like extraordinary and one night only, but there's a sneaky note at the bottom that says, ladies and children not admitted. Naturally, this makes everyone think the show is super edgy and risque, so they're like, we have to see this. Classic reverse psychology. When showtime comes, the theater is packed. The Duke and the King hit the stage, and it's the dumbest thing ever. The King comes out practically naked, covered in paint, hopping around like a deranged frog. That's the whole act. No Shakespeare, no plot, just pure chaos. The crowd is stunned into silence, and then, boom, they burst out laughing. Not because it's good, but because they can't believe they got scammed this hard. But here's where the Duke and the King really show their con artist skills. Before the crowd can riot, they convince everyone that anyone who didn't laugh just didn't get it and should feel embarrassed. Nobody wants to admit they got played, so the audience decides to hype up the show and tell everyone else in town to go see it. The Duke and the King are raking in cash like they've got an infinite money cheat code. Huck's watching all this and just rolling with it because, honestly, what else can he do? He knows these guys are scammers, but at least they're not out here shooting people like Sherburne. For now, Huck's just trying to survive the madness and keep Jim safe, one weird town at a time. So yeah, chapters 21 and 22 are pure chaos. You've got Shakespeare shenanigans, Wild West shootouts, and a mob getting owned by one guy with a porch and a lot of nerve. Through it all, Huck's just chilling, trying to make sense of a world that's as messy and unpredictable as a late-night multiplayer lobby. Stay tuned, because this wild ride is far from over. Alright, so chapters 23 and 24 of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn? Absolute chaos, sprinkled with scams, and topped with Huck Loki questioning the universe. The Duke and the King are still on their Team Rocket grind, running cons like it's their full-time job, while Huck and Jim are just trying not to get caught in the crossfire. Let's dive in. First off, the Royal Nunsuch scam is still popping off. The Duke and King are raking in coins from people who think they're about to see some edgy, highbrow theater. Spoiler, they're not. By the second night, the crowd realizes they've been played, but the Duke and King hit them with some serious con artist jujitsu. They convince everyone that if they tell others about how lame the show was, they'll look dumb for being fooled. So instead of warning people, the crowd hypes it up even more, like, yo, you have to see this. It's wild. Honestly, it's the ultimate hustle. Now, by the third night, the jig is totally up. The new crowd comes ready to riot. They've got rotten eggs, cabbages, and full-on pitchfork energy. But guess what? The Duke and the King already pieced out with all the money before the show even starts. Huck's watching this from the sidelines like, these guys are trash, but dang, they're good at being trash. He's learning a lot about how people work, even if he's not thrilled about it. After pulling off the theater scam, they're back on the raft, and Huck gets a moment to chill with Jim. This is where things hit you right in the feels. Jim starts opening up about his family, and it's heartbreaking. He talks about his wife and kids, and how much he misses them, especially his daughter, who's deaf. Jim's been holding on to so much pain, and you can tell Huck's really starting to see Jim as a human being with dreams, love, and heartbreak, not just some guy society says he should look down on. Huck doesn't say much, but his silence speaks volumes. It's like you can see his brain leveling up morally, 1 XP at a time. But the peace doesn't last long because, surprise, the Duke and King have cooked up yet another scheme. They decide to impersonate a couple of dudes from England to scam an inheritance. Yup, we're going full soap opera mode now. They hear about a rich guy named Peter Wilkes who just died, leaving behind a fat stack of cash for his brothers from England. The real brothers haven't shown up yet, so the Duke and King are like, bet, we'll just be them. No shame, no hesitation. The King takes the role of the older brother, doing the worst British accent you've ever heard, while the Duke pretends to be the younger brother, who conveniently can't talk because he's supposed to be deaf and mute. Honestly, it's giving Among Us vibes. These guys are the imposters, and everyone else is just trying to figure it out. They roll into town and put on the fakest, most dramatic performance of grief you've ever seen. The King is sobbing, hugging strangers, and acting like he's in some over-the-top K-drama. People eat it up, of course, because small-town folks in this book fall for scams faster than NPCs in a bad RPG. Huck's watching all this and just shaking his head. He knows the Duke and King are full of it, but he doesn't know how to stop them without making things worse for him and Jim. The Duke and King even rope Huck into their scam. They're like, hey, you're our servant boy now, so act the part. Huck's not thrilled, but he goes along with it because, at this point, what choice does he have? He's stuck with these clowns, and they're the only thing standing between him, Jim, and a world that would happily turn them in. What's wild, though, is how Huck handles all this. He's getting really good at playing along while secretly side-eyeing everything. He knows the Duke and King are the worst, but he's also clocking how easily people believe lies if they're told with enough confidence. It's like Huck's getting a crash course in human psychology, even if it's coming from two of the worst teachers imaginable. By the end of chapter 24, the Duke and King are fully embedded in their new roles, conning this grieving town for all it's worth. Huck's biding his time, trying to figure out how to get out of this mess without blowing his cover or putting Jim in danger. Jim, meanwhile, is just sticking close to Huck because out of all the madness, their friendship is the only thing that's real. So yeah, these chapters are a wild ride. You've got scams on scams, Huck quietly growing as a person, and Jim reminding us all that he's the MVP of this whole story. It's messy, it's chaotic, and it's only going to get crazier from here. Stay tuned, because this con is just getting started. Alright, let's dive into chapters 25 and 26 of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, where the Duke and the King crank their scam game up to boss level. It's messy, it's ridiculous, and Huck's stuck in the middle of it, just trying to survive the chaos like he's trapped in the worst episode of Scam Wars. So, the Duke and the King pull up to this town, pretending to be Peter Wilkes' long-lost brothers from England. It's giving peak con artist energy. They're putting on fake British accents so bad they'd get roasted in the comments section of any TikTok impersonation challenge. The King's out here acting like he's straight out of Downton Abbey, while the Duke plays the mute brother, because apparently it's easier to fake being silent than to talk like an actual Briton. Huck, meanwhile, is tagging along like the reluctant sidekick in some terrible buddy movie. They show up to Peter Wilkes' funeral, and it's all crocodile tears and dramatic hugs. The King throws himself at Peter's grieving nieces, 3 young girls who have no clue they're being scammed, and starts acting like their long-lost uncle. The oldest, Mary Jane, is super sweet and trusting, which makes this whole scam even more painful to watch. The King's over-the-top performance somehow works, and everyone in town immediately buys it. It's like nobody here has ever watched Scooby-Doo. They can't sniff out a fraud to save their lives. The big prize is Peter's inheritance, $6,000 in cash and some real estate. Of course, the Duke and King are frothing at the mouth to get their hands on it. They put on this whole act of, oh, we're so devastated by Peter's death, but we don't care about the money, no, just give it all to the girls. And the townsfolk are eating it up like it's the latest season of The Bachelor. They practically shove the money into the Duke and King's hands. But, plot twist, the king decides to double down on the scam. Instead of just taking the cash and running, like any halfway decent crook would, he decides to sell Peter's property, too. Why? Because greed is undefeated. Huck's watching this whole thing go down, and he's absolutely disgusted. He's like, okay, scamming strangers is one thing, but scamming these nice girls? That's a whole new level of trash. Meanwhile, the king and duke are so deep in their roles, they're practically method acting. At dinner, they're laying it on thick, talking about how much they miss dear Peter and how grateful they are to be reunited with their family. It's cringe city, and Huck is dying inside. What's worse is that the girls, especially Mary Jane, totally believe it. They're treating these scammers like their actual family, and Huck's over here clenching his fists like he's about to pull a Luffy and punch them into next week. Huck, being Huck, decides he can't just stand by and let this happen. Even though he's been rolling with the Duke and King's schemes up to now, this one crosses a line. He starts plotting how to expose them without getting himself or Jim in trouble. It's tricky, though, because the Duke and King are watching him like hawks, and he doesn't want to risk them figuring out he's not 100% on board. The real highlight of these chapters is how Huck sneaks into action. While the King and Duke are busy being shady, Huck sneaks into the room where they're keeping the $6,000. He grabs the cash, thinking, if I can't blow up their scam directly, I'll at least keep them from running off with all this money. He's got this quiet, sneaky courage that's kind of like an anime protagonist in their first training arc. He's still figuring things out, but he's got the heart for it. Of course, Huck being Huck, he doesn't have a flawless plan. He stashes the money in Peter Wilkes's coffin. Yeah, you read that right. It's morbid, sure, but also kind of genius because who's going to check there? Still, Huck's sweating bullets because if the Duke or King catches him, it's game over. By the end of these chapters, the tension is sky high. Huck's trying to stay one step ahead of the Duke and King, protect the Wilkes sisters, and not blow his cover, all while dealing with the constant threat of Jim being exposed as a runaway. It's a lot, but Huck's instincts are kicking in, and you can tell he's starting to trust his own moral compass more and more. So yeah, chapters 25 and 26 are a wild mix of comedy, cringe, and sneaky heroics. Huck's evolving, the Duke and King are still the worst, and the Wilkes sisters have no idea what kind of mess they're in. It's like watching a heist movie where you're rooting for the inside man to sabotage the whole thing. Stay tuned, because you know this drama is about to blow up in the most chaotic way possible. Alright, so let me break down chapters 27 and 28 of the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn for you in a way that slaps harder than a plot twist in Stranger Things. Picture this, Huck's caught up in some serious drama that's more chaotic than a group chat gone wrong. Okay, so first up, the Scam Squad, aka the King and the Duke, our bootleg Joker and Riddler duo, have just pulled off their pretend-to-be-grieving brothers' con to snatch the inheritance of Peter Wilkes, who recently croaked. They're deep in this Ocean's 11 wannabe hustle, playing the roles of these super sad uncles to fool the townspeople and Wilkes' daughters, Mary Jane, Susan, and Joanna. These girls? Pure-hearted cinnamon rolls, especially Mary Jane, who's got that Disney princess energy, all trust and kindness. But Huck? My guy's sitting there, side-eyeing the entire thing like, I cannot believe I'm still stuck with these clowns. He's disgusted but can't dip out just yet because loyalty and survival are like his main character traits. When the King and Duke stash the stolen gold in a secret place, paranoia hits everyone, even scam artists. Huck decides he's had enough of their nonsense. He sneaks in, yoinks the gold like a sneaky little raccoon, and hides it in Peter Wilkes' coffin. Yes, the coffin. Because apparently, storage is not a thing in 1800s Missouri. Now, imagine this, Huck is sweating bullets at the funeral because, surprise, they're sealing the coffin right now. He's sitting there like a kid who accidentally hit reply all on an embarrassing email, thinking, what if they open the coffin and see all the money I stashed? But the coffin stays closed, and Huck breathes a sigh of relief. Crisis averted, for now. Meanwhile, the King and Duke are still laying it on thick with their fake crying, like they're auditioning for an off-brand telenovela. The townspeople? Eating it up. They're all, wow, these guys are so sincere. What amazing relatives. But then the plot thickens when the actual Wilkes brothers, like the real ones, show up. These dudes are like, who are these imposters, and why are they cosplaying as us? This kicks off a drama-filled Maury-style showdown with the townspeople all torn, trying to figure out who's legit and who's sus. To make things messier, the real brothers don't have all the proof they need because, you know, travel and paperwork back then were like trying to find a good Wi-Fi signal in the woods. So, it's one big, messy who's who situation. In the middle of all this, Huck's trying to stay under the radar while internally screaming, can someone just roll the credits on this nightmare already? But, nope, things only get crazier. The townspeople decide the best way to settle this is to dig up Peter Wilkes' body and check for a tattoo that supposedly proves who the real relatives are. Yeah, they went from let's have a rational discussion to let's disturb the dead real quick. While all this chaos is brewing, Huck sees his chance to pull a ninja vanish. He's about to peace out and live his best life away from the King and Duke's nonsense when Mary Jane catches him looking all shady. Now, Mary Jane is no fool. She knows something's up. Huck, feeling guilty as ever because, remember, he's got that golden retriever heart, comes clean to her about the scam. He spills the tea, telling her about the stolen gold and where it's hidden. Mary Jane's reaction? She's not mad, she's disappointed, which is even worse. But Huck promises her he's doing his best to make things right. He's like, listen, just trust me. Play along, and this will all blow over. And because Mary Jane is basically a saint, she agrees to go along with it. She even helps Huck come up with a plan to expose the king and duke without making things worse for herself or her sisters. So, while the townspeople are over there playing CSI, Coffin Edition, Huck is plotting his escape route. He's in full stealth mode, ducking and dodging drama like he's in a level of Fortnite. But deep down, you can tell he's conflicted because, despite everything, he doesn't like lying to Mary Jane or leaving her to deal with the fallout. These 2 chapters are a wild roller coaster of scams, guilt, and last-minute saves, with Huck trying to balance his inner morality with the need to survive in a world full of sketchy adults. It's like he's stuck in this live-action role-playing game where every decision could either save the day or blow up in his face. And through it all, you can't help but root for him because, even when he's lying or scheming, he's got that core of goodness that makes him one of the realest and most relatable characters in literature. So, yeah, that's the tea on chapters 27 and 28. It's messy, chaotic, and full of drama, just like any good binge-worthy series.